Afternoon, evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar this evening. We're all working remotely today, so just bear with us. We're taking social distancing to a new level. Can everybody see the screen okay? Can everybody see all the slides? Brilliant. Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping to get us started. All of you in the audience are muted today. If you have any questions, then please do type them into the question box and we will pick those up and we will answer them throughout the presentation. And also, we might just leave them for a little while if we know that something else is coming through into the following slides. We aim to be finished by 8 o'clock this evening, and the recording of this will be available afterwards. We'll send you an email link so that you can download it. And that will also be available with all previous AHDB webinars that we've run in the past. There'll also be a very brief survey at the end of this, just to check that everything was okay for you. So we can't really go through a webinar today without mentioning coronavirus. AHDB has been working over the past week to develop a range of materials for you, and there is lots going on with various sector updates. They can be watched through videos and podcasts, so you can listen to those podcasts on the move as well. We're keeping the market information up to date as possible. There's also a lot of business support material, including contingency planning, and we've also got an FAQ set up as well. So if any of you've got any frequently asked questions, please do send those in to the AHDB website and they will be answered within 24 hours for you. If not, then please do call your local KEM and they'll put you through to the right person as well. So we have Peter Kendall joining us this evening, and also NFU's Tom Bradshaw helping me talk through the future of skills. And before we get started onto introductions, Peter, Tom, is there anything you want to add about coronavirus at the moment?
Look, if I go first, go on, Peter. It's Peter. If I can go first, and then I'll hand over to Tom. Look, I realise to be doing a webinar at this moment in time seems slightly crazy, given the worrying nature of what's going on, the shutdown that's going on around the country. But I suspect never's the right time, and we need to get on with planning the future of the industry. I do think, and this is more the NFU's and Tom's territory, but you know, when we come out of this, there'll be lots of questions asked about the future of farming in the UK, the role of food security. So this discussion this evening about how we prepare ourselves, how the industry really steps up the mark to what something I've always referred to as how do we put more British food on more British plates. This has got to be really relevant. So despite the timing feeling a bit bizarre, I'm really glad that we're carrying on. We're lucky as a farming industry, we can press on as normal, but we need to have these debates about what we do for the future and how we make the industry more successful in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, only to add to that, I mean, I'm spending pretty well all day, every day at the moment, trying to work out how we can prepare the industry to deal with the challenges of coronavirus. I mean, a lot of my time at the moment is being spent around seasonal workers and how we access the labour to pick the fruit and veg that are going to be growing in the fields over the next few months, which is going to be a huge challenge, a big opportunity as well. If there are members of the British public that really want to step up, then there's going to be an opportunity to come and pick those fruit and veg on farm. But I think as we prepare for the future, we've got to recognise that we're going to be living in a very different world than we were even a month ago. And there's going to be huge budgetary pressures on the government. And we've really got to fight farming's corner and make sure that everyone sees we're doing everything we can as an industry to step up to the plate, professionalise and be as productive as we possibly can. And skills and training are going to be a critical part of that. So I'm just taking a bit of time out from the day-to-day dealings with coronavirus to actually focus on something which, as we move forward, will be incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think it's an opportunity for the industry to demonstrate the type of skills that we need to move forward with, and actually how we can attract a different group of people that previously we might not have had access to as well. So thanks for those thoughts. We'll just give some brief introductions. You're listening to myself, Tess Howe. I'm the Senior Skills Manager at AHDB. I'm also a member of the senior leadership group, which you're going to hear a lot more about throughout the evening. And that role is really responsible for the AHDB skills program, which focuses on business and people management and looking at how we can increase the participation and recognition of the professional development that actually goes on in the industry. Peter, would you like to give a few words?
Yeah, no, I'm the outgoing, demob happy chairman of AHDB for one more day. I hand over to Nicholas Safar as of the 1st of April. So long history of being involved in the industry, but having been involved, particularly in my time at AHDB, is how we try and make sure that we prevent other countries stealing a march on British agriculture, how we really want to be world beating.
And
I'm Tom Bradshaw, farming in Essex, been involved with the NFU for over 10 years now, but only a month into my role as NFU Vice President. We thought it was going to be challenging, probably dealing with Brexit and new trade relationships. Thankfully, they're words that haven't been muttered too much recently. And I guess we're just focused on the day-to-day world of making sure we get through this. And a lot of my time, as we say, is being spent on working out the implications and the opportunities that come for the future.
That's fantastic. So as we move on, Peter, we're well aware that the industry is flatlined in terms of productivity, despite all the work that we've all been doing, AHDB, NFU, and across the industry, and farmers are becoming more and more efficient. In response to that sort of lack in increase in productivity, and as part of a wider government initiative, the Agricultural Productivity Working Group was set up. Can you put this work into context for the audience and just explain what it's looking to achieve and how it's going to have an impact this time around?
Yeah, if I could step back a bit, actually, this is part of the government BEIS, the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department, was created under the aegis of Vince Cable a number of years ago. And it's been the industrial strategies around how the government can work in partnership with different sections of the economy to try and combat what they believe, and this is obviously picking up Tom's word, before the current crisis of coronavirus, was the productivity lag in UK industry. And this is difficult for farming because, you know, we all, this last few weeks as the weather's been getting better, we've all been busting a gut on our farms. We're tearing around trying to grow really great crops, produce great livestock, and other outputs from the UK farming industry. But the truth is, if we look at the numbers, key competitors around the world are growing significantly faster. We might have been up there with them at the beginning, but if you take the Dutch or the America, the USA, growing at 3 times our rate of productivity per year, over 10 years, that's going to be an enormous gap. It's something we need to address. So out of the government's industrial strategy, a group of representatives of the food and farming industry came together and pitched to government to create what is now the Food and Drink Sector Council. And this was around saying, you know, food, farming, the whole food supply chain is massively important. It's a big part of the economy. And how could we partner up with government to try and find ways of assisting the industry be more successful and aid its productivity? And out of that, I picked up the brief around the Agricultural Productivity Working Group. It sounds like a hell of a mouthful, and it's been a lot of pulling together of different parts of the industry to try and address what we thought was going to be the key bits to unlocking some of the challenges. And while I'm scene setting, I think the big challenge for us as farmers and growers to address is, do we accept we have a productivity challenge? As I reiterate what I said a moment ago, when you are working so hard, when you're busting a gut at home on the farm, to accept that other people are doing things smarter, better than we are, and we are losing ground is difficult. The second one for me, if we do accept that we have a productivity challenge, is have we got a collective ambition to do something about it? Are we prepared as an industry, and Tom alluded to it in his introduction, you know, are we going to come together and say, we see what other countries are doing, how they're smarter than us in certain ways. They collaborate better. They don't have as much fragmentation maybe in their research and development. And that was really a catalyst of trying to pull together the productivity working group to say, what do we need to address? And on the slide in front of you, there's 5 key recommendations out of the report that was published in February of this year. An evidence for farming is a really important, we think, hub for what works. And I really do think we're about to go through a period of massive change in farming, where with the aid of a digital revolution, with a move from probably chemical to biological based agriculture, we really do need clear, verified, independent evidence for what works in this changing world. We also think, on the second item on the slide in front of you, industry KPIs, we think the use of data is going to be unbelievably important in the future. This is not just how we cooperate and collaborate that data from different sources, but how we make sure farmers know how they're performing vis-a-vis key competitors, the best performers in the UK, but also competitively. Because I think one thing, and who knows what will come out of coronavirus at the end of the day, but all the talk at the moment is increased liberalisation of trade, and how we're performing against those key competitors, I think, is also vitally important. But the area which we're focusing on this evening is the third point on that slide, and that's the leadership, skills leadership group. Skills, it's training, and look, I'm sitting here for the first time in my life doing a webinar, and I'm 60 years old in just 2 months' time, so I'm learning new skills. I just think this is one example of how fast the world is moving. The notion that I'd be sitting here in Bedfordshire, Tom in Essex, Tess, I think somewhere in Warwickshire, we're all spread around, coming together with, I think I can see on the screen at the moment, 116 people logged into this webinar. We're just learning to do things unbelievably differently. And why I'm so pleased that AHDB's been really involved in setting up the skills leadership group is because we're going to have to learn to